This episode of the Beauty Industry Podcast was brought to you by Candela Medical. Hello and welcome to the Beauty Industry Podcast, your online support community for the professional beauty industry. I am your host, founding director of Beauty Industry, Tamara Reid. Here we are closing the competitive gap and speaking your language. This is a platform created and dedicated to the professional beauty industry, valuing community over competition. We serve to help connect you with inspiration from industry experts, expand your knowledge through educational pieces, and bring you the latest in product and technology innovation. This is Beauty Industry. Today, my guest is Marguerite Burke from Candela Medical. The idea of combining treatment modalities is not new to our industry. The art of mixing and matching treatments and methods to enhance the client experience, heighten results, and skyrocket the dollar per hour each treatment room is turning over is the ultimate combination for a winning client business strategy. So, when it comes to investing in treatment technology, should we be focusing on multimodalities? Marguerite is a registered nurse who loves all things laser, with a passion for sharing knowledge and holistically approaching the diverse ways that people learn. She believes that learning is grounded by safety, evidence-based practice, and sound clinical results. Marguerite's experience spans over many years in the public hospital system, dermatology nursing, and in the clinical aesthetics field, which makes her the perfect person to speak to this topic today. Today, Marguerite shares with us how you can combine your treatments to make the most of your client results, increasing their outcomes and your hourly revenue. From Candela Medical, today we welcome Marguerite. Marguerite, welcome to the Beauty Industry Podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me today. I was just thinking earlier, I really sort of love your ethos about how we can just have a platform of a community of people coming together who just want to share and learn from each other. I think that's such a wonderful thing.
Totally. And you know what's so relevant in COVID? I think this kind of last 2 years, people are like searching, for a bit more of that connection and that community drive, especially because a lot of us have been isolating in our homes. It's nice to come into the ears and come into the homes of people via podcasts and lives and things like that. So thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, completely agree. It keeps you in touch with everyone. And in a way, it's been like what better time as well, when we might have had that bit of extra time on our hands. Everyone's been taking the opportunity to do some learning and do some education. So it's in that side, it has been good as well.
Yeah, totally. And we're going to continue on that pathway of education today because we're going to chat all of the things multimodality devices, which is very 2021 because everyone wants everything yesterday. But we do start all of our conversations by exploring our guest entrance into the professional beauty and aesthetic industry. So I'd love to start with you there. How and when and where and all of the things did you enter your way into here?
Look, it's probably fair to say in the scheme of things that I fell into it, but then I fell in love. And so my background is in nursing. After I left school, I did work in customer service for a little while, but then I started working in aged care, and I was definitely drawn to, I guess, that kind of human connection and working closely with other people. That was something that really felt valuable to me. And so as way led on to way, I progressed through my nursing career and became a registered nurse. And so I worked in the public hospital system for a very long time. I worked in the wards, in medical, a bit of surgical. I worked in emergency. And so in a nice way, I think that definitely gave me a really good grounding from a clinical perspective as well, and understanding how to really look and appreciate people as a whole person as well, and understanding that holistic side of things where we're not always just looking at physical things, we're really looking at mind, body and spirit all together. And it also, I think, helps to to balance it out and keep it real, that clinical background as well that I started off with. And so even in the hospital system, I sort of always remembered being quite drawn to the skin in the way of wound care and wound management and things like that. I always found that really interesting. And so it was for over a decade that I worked in the public hospital systems. And then over time with family and things like that, I decided that I was willing to sort of explore, looking into another niche and perhaps something as well that was a little bit more user friendly when you had a little one. When it comes to working Monday, a little bit more 9 to 5 with a little bit more availability on the weekends and maybe not so much shift work and night shifts and things like that, even though that was great and flexible and definitely helped me at the time when I needed it. And so from there, I sort of had my feelers out and I was looking for a while, and I got really drawn to this job advertisement for a practice nurse in a dermatology clinic. And I sort of went back to it a couple of times, and I thought, look, I don't have any specific experience in dermatology, but I'm going to give it a go because it sounds really interesting and sounds like something that I'd love to do. And so I went and had my interview there and had a beautiful chat with a dermatologist and the other staff that were working there. And I was very lucky that I got offered the role and sort of grew into the dermatology side of things from there. And so I started off mostly doing assisting the dermatologists and more the medical clinical side of things. But as a part of that, also some of our dermatologists there specialized in aesthetics and in laser in particular, as well as injectables and things too. And so I actually spent a lot of time looking and watching and learning and I guess seeing how everything came together. And also really that time, I learned a lot about the importance of pre-care and post-care as part of that treatment regime too. So again, a really, really good grounding. And from that point in, it was always wonderful knowing that there would be an opportunity that I might be able to start getting involved in some of those things myself as the clinician. And I worked with an amazing dermal therapist there who did some of the lasers and other sort of body treatments as well. And she was just a beautiful mentor to me and really took me under her wing. And I learned a lot from her about skin ingredients, and then also starting to use lasers and then other body treatment modalities as well. And so that was really the start of my journey where I fell into the professional beauty industry. And I was at that dermatology clinic for about 2 or 3 years. And after that, I moved into working with another cosmetic GP, a cosmetic physician in a clinic in Sydney as well. And when I worked there, that really opened up the door to skin and lasers and a little bit of injectables as well. And again, so really sort of finding that increase from where I'd done a lot of medical and clinical to seeing another side where there was a lot of focus on aesthetics and things as well, and really how those two blend and merge together. And again, I was there for a few years. And as it would happen, I got a phone call one day, and it was to see if I was interested in a job working with Candela as a clinical educator. And it was sort of a little bit of a butterfly in my stomach moment because I felt like it combined two things that I really love, which is lasers. I absolutely love lasers in skin, and also sort of sharing knowledge and passing that on to other people. And so I remember sort of right throughout my career from nursing and then working in the aesthetics environment as well, that a lot of people always said to me, oh, Marguerite, you really explain things in a lovely way that helps other people understand it. And I sort of thought to myself, well, probably if I hadn't been a healthcare practitioner, I probably would have done teaching. And so I've arrived now in this wonderful, wonderful position where I've been with Candela for just over 2 years now. And I just feel like I found myself and fallen into my passion, when it comes to this beautiful balance of teaching and sharing information about something I really love and always want to know more about, but also this nice involvement of clinical and medical, as well as cosmetics and aesthetics. So it's really all brought it together for me.
Oh, wow. What a dream run. That sounds like such a fulfilling career for you. You saw that need for skin and wound management and the cascade of the healing process and then went, oh, I'm curious about this. Let me look a little bit further and then come full circle, back into lasers and cosmetics. That's very cool.
Yeah, I really feel lucky. That's to say, when you feel like you're waking up every day, you're looking forward to coming work. That's always a really good thing. You're in the right place. And the thing that I really love about this industry and definitely about lasers and energy-based devices in particular is that you feel like you can never know enough. You feel like there's always something new to learn. And it really keeps you interested and determined to understand more. And it's really taught me that even as an educator, it's a giving and receiving of knowledge. I feel like every time I visit and work with a clinic that I can learn just as much from them as they can learn from me as well, which is lovely.
Oh, aren't you just a dream educator? That's so beautiful.
Oh, thanks.
So, talk to me about Candela a little bit more because we are going to talk about the art of combining treatments today, which is something that in our beauty industry Facebook community is just like so frequently asked. I want to do all of the different treatments in just one session with my clients, but I'm interested to know specifically the benefits of having a machine that does actually treat multiple concerns. So, can you just speak to that a little bit for me?
Absolutely. So, I mean, when we think about Candela, then what we offer is energy-based devices and lasers. And so often when we think about the way that we like to help our patients in our clinics is that we like to use lots of different approaches to try and give them the best results as possible. And we also want that to be a journey so that they'll keep coming back to our clinic, almost like being part of the family. And we know when we want to try and get the best results that usually it's really helpful to have a few different tools in our tool belt. And so particularly when we think about lasers and energy-based devices, what we're really talking about is the skin and the quality of the skin. And so a good way that we can sort of break that down into different parts is that we want to be able to address colors in the skin and then also to be able to address textures and collagen in the skin as well. And so the beautiful thing about multimodality devices is that hopefully it's allowing us to do a few of those things in one go so that we really can try and get the best possible results. That's going to give us our best patient satisfaction, which is also makes us feel good in the kind of work that we do. And it will also keep our customers and patients to keep on returning to us and being retained in our clinic environment when we can tailor that journey within the clinic and change and evolve that journey over time as well as they get improvements or their hopes and wishes and concerns change, throughout that beautification or aging process as well. And then, when I think about it from a financial perspective as well, it's also great for revenue, obviously, when we can keep people coming back into our clinic and our services, but also as well when you actually have a device, it's a very big purchase and you have to take it very seriously. And so you want to be able to get the return of investment on your device as soon as possible. And when we've got multimodalities that we can treat on the one thing, that gives us this great opportunity that we can try and achieve that as quickly as possible, so that we've got that financial benefit for the clinic as well, and then hopefully we can take the benefit of that and look at what we might like to do next, or what device we might like to purchase next as well, of course, too.
Yeah, and I really appreciate rather that you're saying there it needs to be like a win-win-win. You know, it needs to be a win for the client first and foremost. It needs to be a win for the therapist or estheticians who are treating so that they can also get their satisfaction out of, you know, the treatment, because that's obviously passion and purpose and that drives team retention. But then also a win for the business in terms of that profitability. You know, sometimes when we look at devices, we can kind of think, oh, it's great for the client, but what does it give the therapist or what does it give the business? But, or even the other way around, it's great for the business, but how does it really translate to the client? So I really love what you're saying there in terms of that multimodality, like win, win, win is just perfect for everybody. And in terms of those wins, I guess, and another huge question that's frequently asked in our community is like, when it comes to these types of multimodality lasers in particular, like what actually should we be looking for? Because there is a lot of information, and when we start to Google, it can become very quickly overwhelmed. And often in our Facebook community as well, someone will ask one question, there might be like 300 comments on the post, and we feel like we're going in for information, but actually we're more confused when we come out of there. So, yeah, I want to pose that question to you.
I completely agree. So it's wonderful that we're spoilt for choice, that's for sure. And you know, the more options that we can look at, as you say, it can become a really confusing maze of all of these things sound wonderful. So how do I know what's going to be the best for me? And so when we really think about what we want first and foremost, clinically, we need to start thinking about our patient, and we need to think that we should be looking for something that's going to treat the relevant concerns for the people who are actually coming into our clinic. And so a lot of people will talk about having a multimodality platform that includes laser hair reduction on the device, because in the industry these days, it's a common indication that often introduces people to other laser modalities as a bit of a gateway. And so a lot of people who might be choosing their device, it's useful if the platform can perform that from a means of bringing people into the clinic and introducing them to other things. So that's one perspective that we need to start thinking about, what will be good for us when we think about who's actually coming into the clinic. But then more so following on from that, again, I've sort of talked a little bit about that value of taking the holistic approach to our patient and their face and their skin. And so when we're assessing their skin and thinking about what do people really want when they're coming into the clinic, as I said, with lasers and energy-based devices, we can sort of break it down a little bit into colors and textures. And so when we think about colors, we're talking about melanin and hemoglobin, so you know, our pigments and our bloods. And then with textures, we might be thinking about general overall rejuvenation. So can we improve the appearance of fine lines and wrinkles, improve the appearance of pores through collagen reproduction? Do people have scarring from existing skin conditions such as acne or surgical scars? Are the lines and wrinkles deeper? And so we need to think about the people who are coming into our clinic. What are their concerns, and what is going to help us, you know, improve that for them as well? And so that's the first thing I think that you really want to make clear in your mind. What do I need for me in my clinic? And that's going to help you narrow down that pathway of these beautiful choices that we've got with all of the different devices. So we can really try and hone in on what's going to let us do the most number of things. But for the most part, and if I was thinking about myself, when I was looking for a multimodality device, what I would be looking for is hopefully something that can do a bit of all three, but still do it well. You don't want to sort of be the jack of all trades and master of none. And we do have to accept to an extent that maybe one device can't do everything we want it to do. But if we do have a device that can target some pigment and some vascular, and then an element of skin rejuvenation as well, plus or minus some laser hair removal, then that's how we're looking at a really good start to a multimodality device. So something like that's particularly useful perhaps if you are someone who is starting out and you're buying your first device and you're new to laser and energy-based devices. That's a really good way to start your thinking. Perhaps you're already in an established clinic and you're already offering some services and treatments, including skin treatments and skincare, and practitioners who are performing injectables there as well that work on volume. And so adding in a multimodality device that can really tackle the skin when it comes to colors and textures tries to help complete that whole picture when we're trying to look after the whole person as well. So clinically, I think there are considerations that we want to think about when we're trying to decide about a multimodality device. And then also moving on from that, we want to think about, the manufacturer perspective and a service perspective. So if it can treat multiple modalities, have multiple wavelengths, we want it to be done in a way that allows the machine to also perform consistently and reliable. So you want to be able to turn it on every time and know that it's going to be ready to go in a reasonable amount of time, including in between patients, or if you want to be able to switch easily between each of those modalities within the one treatment session as well, so that you can perform combination treatments too. So servicing and times to warm up and times to recalibrate are also questions that you would want to be asking when you're thinking about a multimodality device as well. Overall, we want to make sure from an evidence perspective that, like I said, we don't want to be that jack of all trades, but not do anything really, really well in particular. So we want to know that the indications that we're treating are going to do the job really well, but also safely and effectively from an evidence perspective too.
Totally. That's a good point. And, back to your point of with your multimodality machinery, we want to do a lot of, or want to try to treat as many skin conditions that the client has in the one service so that we can be really efficient for them and also our time and our appointment books. But when it comes to changing the settings, we want that to be super easy, because you don't want a therapist standing there trying to navigate this huge tricky machine. So that's actually a point that I never thought about. I'm curious to know, when we look at multimodality machinery, we are looking at multiple concerns, but in the case of the GentleMax Pro, which is one of your certainly more popular treatments, it only has 2 wavelengths. So for my just brain who has no idea about this, could you just tell me how does 2 wavelengths treat multiple concerns?
So this is absolutely where we get to nerd out a little bit, and we really need to love the science, which is one of my favorite things. So if we can really understand how the mechanism of action and the tissue interaction works with the laser, then we can understand how we can apply this using different settings, using different treatment techniques to achieve many different kinds of things. And so in particular, as you've mentioned, if we're thinking about one of Candela's multimodality devices being our most popular one, the GentleMax Pro, it's got 2 different wavelengths, which is 755 nanometers and 1064 nanometers. And so when we think about wavelengths and what job do they do, the wavelength of a laser determines a couple of things that are really important to us when it comes to settings and parameters. So the wavelength of the laser determines the depth of penetration that wavelength is capable of into the skin tissue. And then also it helps to determine the chromophore absorption. So our skin chromophores being melanin, hemoglobin, and water. We need to put that together with the depth of penetration to know if a laser is going to be good for something. And you can't have one without the other. We need them both working together. And so this is also going to factor in as well a little bit with safety considerations when we think about chromophores. So certain wavelengths are going to be more appropriate from a safety perspective for people who have darker Fitzpatrick skin types, where they've got competing chromophore, competing melanin, which is a safety concern when it comes to how much the laser likes to be absorbed to that. And so what we really need to know is what's our intended target. So are we wanting to have a machine that is going to target hair follicles or blood vessels, pigment, skin rejuvenation? And once we know our target, then we can join the dots with the wavelength. So for example, if you think about laser hair reduction, we know that pigment and melanin is the chromophore that we want to be absorbed by so that we can damage the necessary structures in the hair follicle. And the hair follicle sits in the dermis of the skin tissue. So we need a wavelength that's also going to tip the box there and have the correct depth of penetration so that we can damage those critical structures of the hair follicle in order to achieve a laser hair reduction. And so when we can do both of things with a particular wavelength, that's how we know what it's going to be good for. And so when we think about being able to treat multiple things with the GentleMax Pro, when we think about hair removal, having two different wavelengths allows us to treat all of the Fitzpatrick skin types as safely as possible for laser hair reduction. And so that's particularly important in a country like Australia, where we're so multiculturally diverse and we want to be able to include everyone. And so when it comes to the wavelengths of 755 nanometers and 1064 nanometers, they both are able to penetrate into the dermis of the skin tissue. 1064 nanometers penetrates a little bit deeper. And the absorption that both of these have to melanin is a little bit different. And so the trend to a point is the bigger your wavelength number, the less melanin absorption it's going to have. So 755 nanometers is the wavelength that we use to treat our paler Fitzpatrick skin types 1 to 3, and it has a greater absorption to melanin. And so clinically, that's really good because people with paler Fitzpatrick skin types, we don't have that competing melanin in our flesh. That is a safety concern for us. And so 755 nanometers is sort of an optimal wavelength for us. When we think about 1064 nanometers, we use this for our darker Fitzpatrick skin types, so skin types 4 to 6. So its melanin absorption is less, but from a safety perspective, it's really important that we can have that because it allows us to treat people who have that competing melanin in their flesh safely and still be able to get really good results for them as well. And so that's just for hair removal. Then when we apply those same concepts to the other modalities, that when we can do different kinds of treatments with the device, we know that we can target pigment with our clinical indications. We can target some vascular indications as well, such as facial vessels and leg veins. And we can also use the platform for targeting or rejuvenating the skin, so collagen induction and treating diffuse redness as well, to name a few more things. And so when we apply those concepts to the wavelength, 755 nanometers really, really loves pigment, much more than 1064 nanometers. And so we know that we can adopt a certain treatment technique that will allow us to use 755 nanometers to treat benign epidermal pigment in those same paler Fitzpatrick skin types 1 to 3. With 1064 nanometers, we know that the depth of penetration is the deep dermis. And we also know with 1064 nanometers, it's got a bit less melanin absorption. So it means that we can use it on a more number of people, more number of skin types, but it's not our preferred laser wavelength on this platform for treating pigment. But what 1064 nanometers is good for is for treating vascular lesions, so facial telangiectasias, spider and reticular leg veins, because we've got an attraction to oxyhemoglobin as well, and we can reach deep down into the dermis. We also use the 1064 nanometer wavelength for collagen induction. So 1064 nanometers, it's a bit of a jack of all trades because it has actually a really good absorption to water as well as having a reasonable absorption to pigment and blood too. And so because it's got that good absorption to water as well, we can use that wavelength for bulk heating the reticular dermis, which is that site of collagen reproduction. And so we can make some new collagen for the purpose of skin rejuvenation and improving the appearance of fine lines and wrinkles as well. And so when we can really understand how wavelengths work, then we can understand why it can be good for performing so many things. And that has to come hand in hand with having a device that will also be able to have flexibility in the adjustment of the other treatment parameters as well. So having a variety of spot sizes. We want really small spot sizes to be able to treat individual vascular lesions by tracing them. And we want larger spot sizes where we can perform laser hair reduction treatments, in effective and timely amounts of time as well. And we want to be able to have energies that can be adjusted high and low enough in their intensity, and deliveries of that energy, so pulse durations, that can be short enough or long enough that we can heat those targets safely in order to get the result that we want to as well. And so the reason that GentleMax Pro can treat so many things is because it meets all of the criteria with those things just from those 2 wavelengths, which is wonderful.
Wow. Super impressive. I can hear all of our science nerds on the end of the podcast just going, oh my goodness, ticking my boxes. And I guess if I was a client, just from listening to you there, I would come in, and if you were treating me, you'd go 755. I'm a Fitzpatrick 2, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know, I'm pale as a ghost. 755 for hair removal and also pigment. And then you would go your 1064 for the spider veins and also the capillaries.
That's correct. Absolutely. And so, you've picked up on a good point there about how we can put different things together to match each kind of person that's walking into our room. And then also what you can see a little bit from that, though, is that we can't treat pigment in darker Fitzpatrick skin types in particular with this laser wavelength. We know that there's safer ways that we can do that with other treatment modalities. So the GentleMax Pro, the way that it delivers its light energy is what we call a long pulse laser. And so in laser world, a long pulse laser is sort of a laser that delivers its energy in milliseconds, and that yields heat. And so for paler Fitzpatrick skin types who don't have competing chromophore of melanin in their skin tissue, we can tolerate that mode of treatment a little bit better for our pigment. For patients who have a darker Fitzpatrick skin type, especially 4 to 6, they are better suited when it comes to pigment for lasers that are what we call short pulse. And so short pulse lasers, they deliver their light energy much more quickly in nanoseconds and picoseconds, so a billionth of a second or a trillionth of a second. And they, instead of heating up the pigment and destructing it that way, will actually destroy the pigment by shattering and exploding it. So there's much less heat involved, which means that it's the safer treatment option for those skin types. And so there's always a time and a place where our beautiful treatment modality that can do lots of things, we still know that there are times when we have to choose more suitable options for certain people with certain indications as well.
After the break, Marguerite speaks to science with depths, wavelengths, and more on chromophores. But first, a little more on today's beauty partner, none other than Candela Medical. Community, if you're wondering, apart from the incredible education provided like the knowledge shared in today's conversation, what sets Candela apart, it's their commitment. From the day you become a Candela customer, you experience a true partnership. With the purchase of a Candela advice, you receive a 3-year service warranty, clinical training for you and your team, as well as access to their comprehensive marketing resources. Your success is their success. You can find out more over at candelamedical.com/au. Thank you so much to the team at Candela for making this episode of the Beauty Industry Podcast possible. And now back to Marguerite. I wanted to play devil's advocate here and ask you, would there be any reason why a single modality device would be better suited over a machine that might have multiple modalities?
Yes. So look, I think most of the time we want our device to be able to do as much as possible so that we can make the most of it. We want to have it switched on all day, every day. We want to get that best result for our patient as well. And so multimodalities are very useful for everyone in that perspective. Like I said, particularly if you're someone who's starting out and you're hoping that your device will do a number of things. And so from that regard, I think that definitely, that most of the time we do want to be able to have a multimodality device that can do a number of things. But when we think a little bit further about maybe times where we might want to consider something different. I'm not a laser engineer, I'll say that, but I would just consider that if there were particular manufacturer specifications in the design and technology of a device, and we know that the technology of devices these days is so amazing and sophisticated that sometimes in the way that a device might need to deliver its energy consistently and with stability, that could contribute to why sort of a device might need to be designed as a single modality or not be able to be included in a more complex platform. When we think about how do I get my energy, my laser light energy from the box to the handpiece at the other end, there's that delivery system in between. And so the two sort of main types of delivery systems that we're going to see if we walk into any kind of laser room are something called an articulated arm, which looks like a stiff metal rigid arm. And the other thing that we might see is what we call our fiber optic delivery system. And that's the one that looks a little bit more like a bendy flexy rope. And so there's certain instances with the manufacture of a device where when one might not be compatible to give the energy that we need it to. And so you can walk into any clinic really and look at the arm of the device, and you might have a bit of an idea about what people are actually treating in there. So wherever you see that stiff sort of rigid articulated arm, we know that it means people are probably doing something a bit more high power. So all of our short pulse lasers like the Q-switch nanosecond and the pico lasers like picowave that shatter and explode pigment or are used for tattoo removal, they require that articulated arm sort of structure in order to deliver their energy in the way that we need it to with those very short pulses. Also, when we think about ablative lasers, that vaporize the skin tissue like carbon dioxide laser, for example, that also uses that articulated arm system to deliver its energy from the box to the handpiece. Whereas when you think about laser hair reduction and some of our other vascular modalities, you'll notice that they have that bendy flexy fiber optic. And so I think that that's one exception where we might not necessarily be able to have all of the same multimodalities on the same platform, and that could be a limitation. Also, the other thing that I might consider there, if I'm thinking broadly, is, if I'm starting to think about face and body, I might have a very specific task that I want to get done, like lipolysis, for example. And so, when we think about body devices that are used in fat cell reduction or fat cell shrinkage, often we see those as a standalone device compared to something that's built into the same platform. And so there are times when we want our one platform to do everything that it does really well, and we might need to have a different single device or standalone device that does other things very specifically too. And so when you think about, a device that might treat lipolysis or body compared to something where we might be using it for skin, we might want to be able to operate those devices from two different rooms as well, so that we can have them running both at the same time. And so that's another reason where we like to be able to be doing different kinds of treatments if we've got more than one room operating as well. And so we might have two multimodality devices in two different rooms, but there's times and places certainly where we do need to be a little bit more specific and tailored in what a platform may or may not offer. But on the most part, I think it's very obvious from an industry perspective that businesses and practitioners, we're keen to engage in multimodality devices because we do want it all. And so I really think that's going to continue to drive research and development to match that kind of demand whenever it's practicable with the device. And even, when we look at Candela, the GentleMax Pro, it's our most popular multimodality device, but it's definitely not our only one. Our Nautilus and our Picoway also incorporate those multimodalities too. And I think that's why people really love them. I think that's what we want. We want to be able to do as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned there the different arms. So you've got like the stronger, more rigid arm, and then you've got your more flexy kind of fiber optic arm. I'm thinking, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that there are like certain accessories that one might need to make sure that you can actually utilize all the different facets of the machine. Is that right?
Yeah, so if we look at the GentleMax Pro, then there's a different number of handpieces that can come with the device. So Even the wavelengths in itself, when we look at our gentle series laser, it's sort of something that can be built upon. And so the accessories that you choose or change along the way can sort of end up being a bit tailored or matched to that. So the Gentle Max Pro is the dual wavelength 755 and 1064 nanometer within itself. And if you are only using a device that has one of those wavelengths and not the other at any given time, then that is certainly going to limit which sort of range of treatments that you'll be able to do on which particular skin types. But moving on from the wavelengths, if we think sort of more about handpieces, there's 3 separate handpieces with that particular device. And so everything comes with the standard handpiece. And truly, if you've got both wavelengths, you can actually treat a good number of the indications just with your standard handpiece alone. You'll be able to do your hair reduction, you'll be able to do your pigmented lesion treatments, and you'll be able to do your skin rejuvenation collagen induction treatments as well. When it comes to the vascular with the 1064 nanometer wavelength, there is a separate handpiece called the specialty vascular handpiece that you will need to use to be able to treat those lesions. But it's really good because it's what gives us the smaller spot sizes. And so when we're using 1064 nanometers, we're penetrating deep into the dermal skin tissue. We're using really high energies, often hundreds of joules. And so we want to be really precise and focal in the treatment that we're doing. And this handpiece gives you those really small spot sizes, even as small as 1.5 millimeter, which is great for tracing vessels on the face, so that we can achieve what we want to really precisely and spare the surrounding skin tissue from those high energies as much as possible. And so also that vascular handpiece, which I really liked, given other devices that I've used in my own field experience before as well, is that it's got this linear spot size as well called the 3x10 millimeter spot size. And so that one, it's my go-to for tracing leg vessels. So instead of creating a little circular spot, it creates a 3 millimeter spot that's a 1 centimeter line. And so when you've got these sort of linear spider veins on the legs, that would be great to trace out. I love using that 3x10 because you can get more of that vessel just in one go, and again, sparing the surrounding skin tissue. And so I find that really helps to get the best results when it comes to achieving the clinical endpoint of constricting that vessel and coagulating it. But the vascular handpiece in particular, it's special as well because of the cooling system that's incorporated with it. And so Candela has a cooling system called DCD, which stands for Dynamic Cooling Device. And it's basically like a cryogen frost spray that's very precise, and it's a metered dose that's let out by the machine every single time that you fire a pulse. So milliseconds before the laser light energy pulses, we get this spray of cooling cryogen on the skin surface, which is very cold and very effective. And so we always want to cool and protect the epidermis as much as possible when we're using such high fluences. And the DCD allows us to do that really specifically and really precisely, but from a comfort measure for the patient as well. That also helps to make the treatment much more comfortable too. So in addition to your vascular handpiece, you would be purchasing cryogen canisters as your consumable. But when you think about one canister, you're going to get about 8,000 to 10,000 pulses out of that. And so when you're just treating small vascular areas, even one canister is going to last you quite a long amount of time. And then the third handpiece is what we call our large specialty hair removal handpiece. And so you don't need to have this one to do hair removal. It's like an added extra, but that said and done, it is extremely popular, and it's fair to say that most of our clinics use it and have it. And so this large specialty hair removal handpiece, it gives us our larger spot sizes from 20 to 24 millimeter, whereas the standard handpiece goes up to 18 millimeter spot size. And so it's like everything, there's a time and a place of when we like to use bigger spot sizes. So when it comes to hair reduction, if we're treating a large body area with just the standard handpiece, we can still use up to our largest size, which is 18 millimeters, but we can also go down to 12 millimeters or 15 millimeters if we want to treat, smaller, more focal areas like regions of the face, for example. But what we do know clinically when it comes to laser hair reduction is that using a larger spot size also helps to improve our depth of penetration, because when we think about the laser beam, not 100% of the energy absorbs where we fire the shot. Some of it reflects and scatters, and some of it reflects and scatters off the surface of the skin. And that's why we have that laser controlled room and all of our laser eye safety. But some of it scatters underneath the surface as well. And so when we have a bigger spot size, it kind of encapsulates and better takes advantage of that lost laser scatter. So overall, it helps to improve our depth of penetration. And so using an 18 millimeter spot size up to a 24 millimeter spot size is great for laser hair reduction because it helps us get that good coverage and depth of penetration too. And so when we look at the 20 to 24 millimeter spot size, when we think about a larger area, that also allows us to perform the treatment in a much quicker amount of time. And so that's good for the practitioner because, with hair removal, we may not necessarily want to be there all day. We'd like to get the treatment done in a timely manner for our patient as well. But for the business too, when we've got a larger spot size and we can treat more quickly, it means that we can fit in more appointments into our patient flow for the day as well. So whilst the large specialty hair removal handpiece isn't essential, a lot of people do really like it for that reason.
Yeah, and you just had me thinking as you were talking there with in Australia, particularly, half the country is in lockdown right now. And when we open, our appointments are going to be absolutely manic, which is very exciting, for both clients and also businesses and therapists. But what we are going to see is clients wanting all of the things done, in the one treatment session. And I'm just wondering, can you treat more than one concern with the laser at the one time in the one session?
Yeah, so really, really good question. And I think the answer to that needs to be if it's safe to do so. And so that's going to vary, depending on your individual assessment of the patient, as well as your own experience and expertise as the practitioner when it comes to some things. And also, I guess, thinking about that flow of the time spent in your treatment room through the clinic when you are trying to meet appointments for multiple people as well, and how much time your patient has and remains comfortable in the room too. But certainly potentially you can treat more than one concern in the same session. And so very basically, we know that we can do our laser hair reduction treatment on the body, and then we might also do our laser skin rejuvenation on the face, for example. Or if we're just looking at the face, you might have a patient who experiences flushing and blushing, diffuse redness on their cheeks, but then they also have some broken vessels around their alar region, the corner of their nose, and their chin. And so, in your one treatment session, you can make that bespoke and treat those areas separately using the relevant hand pieces and spot sizes so that you can try and incorporate that into one session. Moving on from that, if you're thinking about overlapping two concerns or a combination of treatments within the same zone, then it's fair to say, I guess, that we always want to cross the finish line in the safest possible way. And so sometimes it may end up being more suitable to tailor like a series of treatments that are going to address the different treatment concerns as a bit of a work in progress. So for example, we might want to address someone's pigment first because that's their main concern that they would like to address. And we might do that over the initial 3 sessions. But then after that, it's that great opportunity to continue on with a series of collagen induction treatments so that we can continue with maintaining the skin and trying to see the best possible results by continuing that at the end of the journey as well. And so I think, number one, we always need to be guided by safety as paramount. And like I said, our own experience. And we have to be accepting as well that sometimes throughout a course of treatments, that might be something that's quite dynamic as well. So within any individual treatment, we're constantly looking and listening and feeling and assessing our patient's skin response throughout the treatment. And we always need to be accepting to sort of modify that plan and change course when we need to as well, and manage that expectation with our patient too.
That's a good point, because everybody is going to want everything. I was just saying,
Yes.
just on an episode the other day, when I come out, I'm like head to toe, laser, scrubs, spa, facials, like give me everything. So,
Absolutely.
I think we've got to be practical, but also as well, like it's a great opportunity for like upgrading and upselling and really maximizing the treatment space. And speaking of, one of my bugbears is when people buy devices and they don't utilize it to the best of their ability, and you see this client, you've got a whole body, a whole face, so much skin that you can work on, yet you just do the same thing over and over again because that's what you're really comfortable with. And I would be pretty safe in saying that I'm sure a lot of our listeners have the Gentle series, as it is one of your most popular devices. Even I've had that myself, but I don't think people realize like just how versatile it can actually be. So I'm wondering, can you just like briefly kind of let us know like what actual treatments can be performed with this device?
Absolutely. And I sort of completely agree with what you're saying, that we can get very comfortable in set in our ways about what we're treating from a day-to-day basis. And then we don't take advantage of everything the device can do. And so really when we think about hair removal, like we often say, that's our gateway to other treatments. But that's that time where we are talking to our patient and building that rapport with them, and also looking at and assessing their skin. And so it's a great time to start the conversation with them. When we're looking and seeing things that we can introduce the ideas that the laser can do other things. And particularly when they're already happy to be receiving treatment for laser hair reduction with the Gentle laser, we also know that they've already got that trust and assurance that the device is working well for them. And so, it's a good opportunity that they will feel confident with exploring other treatments on that device too. And so when we think about the main other TGA clinically approved indications that we can use on the Gentle Pro, let's have a look at the 755 nanometer first. So other than laser hair reduction, the main indication that we talk about there is the treatment of benign epidermal pigmented lesions. And so mostly what we're talking about there is freckles and then sun damage like solar lentigines. And so when we think about Australia, we've got lots of Caucasian people, Fitzpatrick skin types 1, 2, 3, who have been exposed to Australia's UV rays and have sun damage. And so it's a really great opportunity that we can capture a good audience there, and obviously taking in any safety considerations when it comes to that person being compliant with the treatment before they walk into the room and after they leave the room when it comes to sun protection and things like that as well, so that the treatment stays safe. But with the 755 nanometer wavelength, we can modify our treatment technique differently to the way that we do hair reduction. So rather than yielding that heat injury into the dermis where the light is absorbed by the melanin in the hair follicle, instead we're yielding our controlled heat injury into the epidermal pigmented spots. And so one of the ways that we do that is by deactivating the cooling during the treatment. So when you think about cooling, that's there to try and cool and protect the epidermis, which is what we love to do. But when we need to yield our heat injury there, because that's when our target is, that's how one of the ways that we modify that treatment technique that allows us to treat those pigmented spots effectively. And so whenever we think about that, it's always really important that we understand that it needs to be the right kind of pigment to treat. It needs to be appropriate. And so we want to make sure, like I said, benign epidermal pigment. It's always recommended that our patient has had an up-to-date skin check by their dermatologist or doctor, so we can make sure that the lesions that we're treating are benign and appropriate. We want to make sure that we really understand a diagnosis of that epidermal pigment. So like I said, it's really freckles and sun damage that we're thinking about that. We know when it comes to other kinds of epidermal pigment that it might not necessarily be best friends with lasers that yield heat. So melasma and hormonal pigment, for example, there, we know that nothing really replaces first-line medical management when it comes to melasma. But certainly if any device was going to be used whatsoever, it tends not to be a heat-yielding device. So it's really important that we understand what we're treating from that perspective there too, and make sure that the lesions are benign as well. But it's great that the 755 nanometer wavelength can treat those pigmented lesions for our Pella-Fitzpatrick skin types 1 to 3. And like I mentioned a little bit earlier, we know that lasers that have more of a photoacoustic effect, so nano and picosecond lasers, are the safer preferred option for the darker Fitzpatrick skin types 4 to 6. So they're the two main indications, hair and pigment with the 755 nanometer. If you're a medical practitioner working in the clinic, there are some additional advanced modalities that sometimes get used with the 755 nanometer as well. Sometimes resistant port wine stains, so port wine stains that haven't responded to 595 nanometer V-beam, for example, sometimes they will use the 755 nanometer with caution because it has a greater depth of penetration as well. So again, we're always considering what our own scope of practice and expertise is when we make those decisions. Moving on from there, if we have a look at the 1064 nanometer wavelength, so other than treating our darker Fitzpatrick skin types 4 to 6 for laser hair reduction, we can use 1064 nanometers to treat vascular lesions too. So facial telangiectasia, reticular and spider leg veins, so not varicose veins though, and also little cherryangiomas or Campbell de Morgan spots as well can be treated with the 1064 nanometer wavelength. That's what our TGA clearance is for when it comes to vascular lesions. Again, when you think about doctors and medical practitioners, those peers in the industry might also be using the 1064 nanometer wavelength to treat things like venous lakes and warts as well as another example. And so when we think about facial vessels, again, these are really common. They can happen in a broad spectrum of Fitzpatrick skin types. And the good thing about 1064 nanometers is because it doesn't have such a strong absorption by melanin, we've got the scope to treat more safely that broader number of Fitzpatrick skin types as well. And we know that when we can improve the appearance of blood vessels, that can have a great appearance to the overall, or a greater improvement to the overall appearance of the skin. And so I do think that that's really useful, and it doesn't take long at all to switch over to your specialty vascular handpiece. You can do it within a couple of minutes and then change back again very easily to your other handpieces if you need it again. And so I think that the treatment of facial vessels is something that's very commonly used with the vascular handpiece. And then building on from that, we know that we can also use it to treat our leg vessels. So 1064 nanometers, other than having that absorption with hemoglobin, it also travels deep into the reticular dermis, which is the side of those vessels. So, we think about vessels on the surface, there are pinks and reds. And then when we think about leg vessels, these are more our blues and purples. So they're a little bit deeper down. And I think the treatment of leg vessels, it's a skill that we can really finesse and have a good opportunity to perform treatments well with these. And training is a big part, I think, of treating leg vessels effectively too, from a safety perspective, but also from a treatment technique perspective too. But when you think about the kinds of people that are coming into your clinic and what kind of leg vessels potentially could we treat, we're looking at vessels that are less than 3 millimeters in diameter. So we use our vein gauge to measure that. If you look at 3 millimeters on a vessel gauge, that's actually pretty hefty. We know that sclerotherapy is still the gold standard treatment for leg vessels, but there's certainly a time and a place for the 1064 nanometer laser. So you can use them on vessels less than 3 millimeters, but you'll see on your vein gauge that even vessels up to 1.5 millimeters in spot size, that's still something that's quite reasonable inside. So we've got good scope there. But people who perhaps have had sclerotherapy and they're looking looking to mop up a little bit of what's left over, that might be a good candidate for someone who is looking to have leg vessels treated. But other than that, people who might just have, small collections, so smaller than the size of the palm of your hand, or some scattered spider veins, are also people who would be a good candidate for this laser treatment. And so when we think about who that is that's walking through our door, we can think about people who are on their feet all day. So us in our occupation, medical staff, retail, people who are on their feet all day can be more prone to those spider leg vessels, and so they can be a really good candidate. Sometimes people who've had weight fluctuations as well. Sometimes people post-pregnancy. So of course, as long as they've finished breastfeeding and they're no longer pregnant as well, from a safety perspective, they're often more prone to those spider veins after that as well. And sometimes there's just some hormonal and hereditary influences too. But if we can think about who is already coming into us, who might be a good candidate, then they're people who we can start having the conversation with too. And again, everyone's having their legs treated for laser hair reduction. And so one thing that's really important when we're thinking about treating leg vessels is we don't really just want to look at the collection. We want to look at the whole leg. We want to make sure that there's no really obvious venous compromise and varicose veins or things like that might make us think they're not going to be a suitable candidate for treatment. But when people are having their legs done, that's the perfect opportunity for us to assess the whole canvas, and then also to start having that conversation and say, oh, did you know that while I'm treating your legs, this laser actually can treat those spider veins as well, if that's something that concerns you too. And so I really think that there's so much value in increasing our use of the vascular modality on the platform as well. Moving on from that, we can start looking at our treatment for collagen induction. So in our TGA clearance, and what we talk about is a reference to wrinkle reduction and skin tightening. And so personally, one thing I would say, when we think about the words that we use, we know how important that can be. We always want to make sure we manage our patients' expectations about what kind of a result that they can expect to achieve with our treatment. And so I like talking about collagen induction and neocollagenesis because I want to make sure that people can understand what this 10.6 4 nanometer skin rejuvenation wavelength on the laser is capable of achieving in comparison to other modalities that people know about in the industry. And so what we know is that with the 10.6 4 nanometer wavelength, like I said, it really lacks the water chromophore, and then also it gets absorbed by hemoglobin too. And so the way that this works is that we're using a treatment technique that is going to bulk heat the dermis of the skin tissue to a therapeutic temperature by being absorbed by the water and the hemoglobin chromophore, which is why we can also help with treating diffuse redness and flushing and blushing as well. And when we reach that therapeutic temperature, we know that it sets off an inflammatory cascade of events. We know we've got our fibroblasts sitting down there too that are an important part of that process. And it allows us to work on creating some new collagen, so some new building blocks in the skin tissue. And we know that, from our 30s, collagen depletes by 1% per year from there. And so this is a great kind of treatment because it's low downtime. A lot of people sort of refer to it a little bit like a lunchtime laser. It should be something that's quite comfortable. I sort of feel like it feels a little bit like warm to hot raindrops on the skin, and you'll just look a bit blush afterwards like you've done a gym workout. And because we haven't broken the skin, you are able to apply your powder or gentle makeup after the treatment. Again, being 10.6 4, we can use this on a diverse range of Fitzpatrick skin types with patients that are coming into our clinic. And so it's a really great and I think underutilized option for people who might even be looking for a monthly skin treatment that they can come into us for that's going to help improve the appearance of fine lines and maybe the appearance of pores. maybe for those people who are looking for a little bit of a step up in their treatment regime from a standard facial as well. And so everything has a role and a place. And this is about collagen induction. It's not going to replace what a chemical peel can do for the skin tissue, for example, but it's just something else great that we can think about people who are coming in regularly, that's non-invasive. It takes a similar amount of time. It doesn't take too long, that we could really try and take much more advantage from on this platform. And so we know that collagen doesn't happen overnight. It's an 8 to 12 week process for collagen reproduction, and people are going to see a slow improvement of results over a matter of months, and a series of treatments is recommended. This is something that's not invasive, but a lot of people do also like to time it. If they know that they've got a special event coming up in a couple of days, they'll try and time their monthly treatment so that they have this collagen induction a couple of days before, because in the short term, the kind of feedback that we hear anecdotally is that people feel like they've got the glow, or people have told them that they look fresh and well in those days after their treatment. And so people like to sort of time it near a special event for that reason sometimes as well. And so, as I said at the beginning, with all treatments, we need to manage that realistic expectation. And so when we think about, the words wrinkle reduction or skin tightening, what is that actually going to mean? And so this non-invasive sort of collagen induction treatment, it's just working on general improvement in the dermis of the skin tissue. This is not going to cause any deeper skin tightening. We're not working on the samaz or something like that. When we think about the elastic nature of the skin tissue, if someone's got quite crepey skin and heavy elastosis, we need to be careful about managing what their expectations are. When we say wrinkle reduction, we need to understand that this treatment is not going to work like an anti-wrinkle rejection injection that is going to relax those muscles that have dynamic movement. But there are great advantages to it when we can set that expectation with the patient about what we can achieve over a course of treatments. And it's really user-friendly and great for the staff, to perform as well in a reasonable appointment time. And then the last one that I'll mention to you about, which doesn't get used too often either, and it is something that you need to think about, but we're also TGA cleared with the 1064 nanometer wavelength for the treatment of onychomycosis, fungal nail. And so there's important things that we need to consider with this kind of treatment. First and foremost, starting with making sure that there's actually a correct diagnosis, so that it is fungal nail and that we're not looking at nail psoriasis by comparison. When it comes to how we prepare for the treatment, if the nail is really thickened and graphotic, so sort of greater than 2 or 3 millimeters, then to make sure that light absorption happens, that fungal nail needs to be drilled or filed down prior to the treatment. And so when we think about, fungal spores that are airborne, we know that we've got a sort of an airborne plume risk there. And so if nails need to be prepared, before this particular laser treatment, and they need to be filed or drilled, then, the best practice there would be to make sure that you had a high filtration mask, like a 0.1 micron N95, and also a smoke evacuator while you were doing that filing process. So these are considerations where I can understand why maybe that treatment modality isn't as much utilized on this platform, but I think it's certainly good that it's there. Particularly, you might be working in a setting where you've got different kinds of practitioners, you've got allied health, maybe you've got a podiatrist, and this could be something really good that could be utilized with them as well. And so a series of treatments are needed with the fungal nail, and you'll have a slow progression of results over months. When you think about a great big toe, it can sort of take 12 months to grow out from woe to go. And so the time it takes that we see those results is a little bit longer. And we actually know as well that the patient being compliant with their treatment modalities outside of the laser is also going to impact the success of this treatment too. But it's good to know how it works. And so one of the things that we can do with the Gentle Max laser is adjust our pulse duration down to micro pulses, so 0.3 and 0.5 milliseconds. And what that allows us to do with a skin painting micropulse technique is heat the water inside the fungal cells that will damage them. And so we're TGA cleared to have that temporary increase in clear nail in those patients that have onychomycosis too. And a lot of people don't know about that one.
Amazing. Oh my goodness. So much information. And, so many treatments that can be performed. And I'm sure there are lots of people that are listening going, oh my goodness, my machine is sitting in the corner. I'm just using it for hair removal. But in fact, there is a lot that they can actually use it for. So Marguerite, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. It's been such a delight having a chat with you, and so much information. I'm sure everyone's going to grab their pens and their notebooks out and take lots of notes on this one. And I so appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a delight. Always love sharing information, and I love listening to what everyone else has to say as well.
Wow, what an episode. Are you a science or a technical buff that's just lapping up this episode? Because I can imagine that you're buzzing with ideas by now on treatments and concerns that you can partner up with. And I feel like the practical way Marguerite explains the detail of the treatments just lands so well, and you can absolutely see why she's on the education team at Candela. If you have a topic or education session that you would like to explore more, please let us know by DMing us over on our socials at Beauté Industry or myself at Tamara Reid Beauté, or you can even pop into the Beauté Industry Facebook community and start the conversation. We always appreciate your input. Until next time, stay connected.